up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Superdraft Breakdown Show here, where I'm going to be breaking down Superdraft pricing, well, multipliers, I guess, NBA strategy, what to do on tonight's competitions, how to sign up, what everything is on that entire site, scoring everything, this and that, hither and thither, to and fro, whatnot, blah, blah, blah. In any case, yeah, welcome to the Superdraft Show. If you haven't signed up for it yet, making bad life choices, sign up using the promo code Grinders. Get a free $50 deposit bonus. That's an instant deposit bonus. Play it right away. Get some money in these competitions that already have overlay, plus a 50% deposit bonus up to $500. That's a lot of free money here. Best sign-up bonus in the industry right now. Plus, they are going to be entering you in a raffle for Caesars Entertainment. Yes, they just got bought out, or at least sponsored, or at least partnered, whatever it is, with Caesars Entertainment. We'll see what ends up coming of it. But one thing we do know for sure is they will be doing a raffle for 10,000 Caesars reward points, which is equal to $1,000. Actually, it's 100,000 points, equal to $1,000 at any Caesars Entertainment property. They got 45 across the U.S., tons over in Vegas. I was just there the other week. Absolutely fantastic place to stay. So free money, possibly, if you win that raffle. So get signed up. Again, promo code Grinders, and get on Superdraft, where you're going to see more overlay here than anywhere else in the industry. They're just throwing money at people. I've been getting a lot of it. I've been giving a lot of it back to other people, but that's beside the point. Fantastic site, and I've been playing on it for a while, so I'm going to give you this strategy on today's slate. We got a nice little 7-game slate, or is it a little smaller than that? I can't remember. I think they take out the first game, so it's going to be a 6-game slate, but I've already done the research. I'm going to break down everything. I've got RG projections pulled up right here. Yeah, we don't have it in Lineup HQ yet, but I have it in there, and essentially it's a multiplier program. So what it does is however many points any player gets, they have a multiplier. So Donovan Mitchell, for instance, right here, 1.4 times multiplier. We look at his median projection. That's including the multiplier over here. So essentially, if he ends up with 100 points, then he gets 140 points over on Superdraft. Kyrie Irving, if he ends up with 50 points, he gets 60 points over on Superdraft because of the multiplier. You can play anyone you want, so no worries about 2v2 swaps. Can I throw this guy in if I throw that guy in? None of that stuff at all. It's pretty much just whoever you want to play, you play. So I'm going to be breaking that down, and if you see me a little bit distracted here at one time or another, it's because guess what? Top Shot's going to be dropping a Cool Cats. This is not a promo for it. This is not advertising for it. This is just, I want one of them Cool Cats. So as soon as it pops up there, I'm going to try and get it on that. So I'll be popping between screens, but still, you will have enough attention for me to give you the best info. If you guys got any questions, go ahead and drop in the chat. I think 20, 30, 40, 50. I don't know how many of you are watching right now this live. A lot of people, or a little people, who knows? But I'm going to be breaking everything down. So essentially, there are 3 guards, 3 forwards, and 1 center in every lineup. Occasionally, you're going to find a little bit of dual position eligibility. We got Embiid right here. We got Gobert right here with just the center, but Embiid's got multiple position. So we're going to start with the center position where you only have one. It's a little bit interesting today. Occasionally, we have an absolute lock and load. Like last night, we had a lock and load. Joker ended up playing pretty darn well. His multiplier was a little bit too high. But tonight, we have a little bit more volatility here, a little bit more options. And we start off with the guy up at the top, Embiid, who is currently questionable. It's a tough matchup going against Utah. We all know that Gobert is probably going to end up winning Defensive Player of the Year. I think he's the odds-on favorite, and they've been fantastic. Utah, the hottest team in the league, the best team in the league at this moment right now. Been crushing, but Embiid may or may not play. So that could open some things up. We're not really sure at the moment, but he's a guy that if he ends up playing, 1.15x multiplier is a bit of a mispricing here. He should be around 1.05. So definitely offers you some value. One of the highest median projections, one of the highest ceiling projections on the entire slate. But you don't have to just play him at center. You can play him at forward. You can play him at center, either one. So it all depends on what you want to do with the rest of your lineup. But if you want to game stack it, throw Embiid and Gobert in there, you can. You just throw Embiid at the forward position, throw Gobert at the center position, and kind of move on there. None of these packs are showing up over on Top Shots, but I'm not worried about that. I'm doing this show. I just want a Cool Cat. But outside of that, like, it's a little bit interesting. Collins at 1.45x multiplier. He's an all right play, mostly a tournament play. Bam Adebayo, 1.25x multiplier. more of a tournament play than a cash game play, although I won't argue with him in cash. He's definitely a decent play. Jared Allen, depending on if Gobert plays or not, or if Drummond plays or not, we haven't really gotten news that he won't play. It's just my sneaky suspicion that it might end up happening. So he is potentially in play for tournaments, potentially a guy that can end up with a big outing if he ends up getting the minutes. Just will he end up getting the minutes? I don't know. It's all up in the air. It's kind of what it is. Someone to keep an eye out for. Capella, decent matchup versus New York for him. Like, he should be getting a bunch of minutes because they kind of have to take him out depending on his defensive ability. And the other night versus Porzingis, he was getting absolutely destroyed. So didn't really do too much on the defensive end. They had to pop him out of there. So didn't happen. May get 30 plus minutes tonight. I think he's in play for tournaments. DeAndre Jordan, 1.75x multiplier. Definitely a guy that is in play, I think. They do a lot of pick and roll stuff. Harden and him work great together. 1.75x multiplier can get you the double-double bonus. Sacramento's the worst defensive team by a fairly wide margin this year, and I think that he's in play for tournaments. Not a great play, but he's definitely in play for tournaments. You keep going, like, the interesting one here is going to be Dwight Howard, 1.85x multiplier. If Embiid is out, then he immediately, projection goes way up, possibly gets 30 minutes, should absolutely crush if he ends up getting that time. So he's a guy watch out for. I'll highlight him here in red because that's generally what I do on these things when they're more in play because of injury news. So same thing with Embiid here. Let's move on over to forward. Again, you guys got any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'm checking over there. Nerlens Noel, yeah, might as well go back over to that. Or I think he's both power forward and whatever else, center eligible. I'm trying to look down on him. I don't see him anywhere. We're going to move on back to center. But Nerlens Noel, I'm not sure if he's in play. So the interesting part about it, yeah, 1.8x. He's definitely in play there. Or for tournaments, I wouldn't trust him in cash. He can get into foul trouble. It's a matchup versus Atlanta. Capel's probably going to eat into his production a little bit. But we see here his median outcome, 46. His ceiling outcome, 69. Nice. Main thing with him is means he actually had a nice little write-up. Per 36, I think he's averaging 5.63 steals/blocks. So Superdraft, it is a little bit of a mix between DraftKings and FanDuel scoring. So 3 points for steals, 3 points for blocks, -1 point for turnovers, but then everything else is DK. So you got the double-double bonus, the triple-double bonus, and you got 3.5 points for a three-pointer. So you get that extra little half-point bonus. Doesn't seem like a ton, but when you're getting guys to these 1.8x multiplier, one steal, one block is now worth 5.6 points. Like, it's an actual pretty big upgrade. So it's something to watch out for. Did we get news that Drummond is out for trade purposes? I can't remember. I thought it was just Griffin, but I didn't see him on the injury report, although I kind of suspected they might play. Wagner, I'm not sure if I'd use him. Wagner, I think, is at a 2x multiplier, but he's not terribly in play. Like, it's an interesting slate. We'll move on over to forward here. Let's see. Says he's out on Superdraft. I'm going to double check this right here, see if he has been ruled out officially. Okay, yeah, he is inactive. All right. So sorry, I didn't see that news earlier. Kind of been scrambling a little bit. But yeah, with Drummond out, Jared Allen's definitely in play at a 1.5x multiplier. That's a bit too low. He's the guy that can crush if he gets the minutes, which it looks like he should get the minutes, and a decent matchup going versus Golden State. But let's move on over here to the forward position. And yeah, of course, this top shot drop is not going how it's supposed to. But Embiid, already talked about. Butler has been absolutely crushing. Like, Butler is putting up 50 points consistently on most nights. It's matchup versus the Clippers. We haven't gotten news on whether Kawhi or Paul George is going to play because they're on the second end of the back-to-back. So he may be more in play, less in play. Like, it's obviously a better matchup if you don't have Paul George or Kawhi in there because they're two of the best defenders in the NBA. So if Butler's in there and it's projected to be a close game, I'd kind of check on Vegas odds to see what the spread is once Kawhi or George is deemed as available or not available. But I think regardless, Jimmy Butler is a core play. He's probably a guy that you're going with in cash. So I kind of highlighted guys in blue. Guys in blue are generally your cash game options, cash game core. Obviously, things change a little bit throughout the course of the day, but as of right now, your cash game build's basically like Draymond, Butler, Embiid, Gobert, and Donovan Mitchell and a few other guards. That's kind of your core, because Butler at a 1.3x multiplier is way, way too high. Like that is just a silly price. The only more ridiculous one is probably Donovan Mitchell. So Donovan Mitchell, we'll get to that, is at 1.4 and is a lock and load for me. But Ingles sitting here at 1.75x multiplier. Without Conley there, he tends to run the point a little bit more. With Donovan Mitchell facilitating more, he dumps it off to Ingles, and Ingles can end up with 5, 6 threes in any given matchup. He's going to be shooting behind the arc, a matchup versus Philly. Obviously, tough defensive matchup, but he can end up getting there pretty easily. It looks like the Top Shot pack drop got delayed 30 minutes. So I'm fully your guys's for the next however long the show goes. But Kelly Oubre has been crushing random games recently. Match versus Cleveland, not too bad here. 1.5x multiplier, a little high. He's a guy that I'm definitely using a decent amount in tournaments. Same thing with Bam. Kawhi, depending on if he's available or not, is a guy that will be in play for tournaments, even at a smaller multiplier, but not a guy that I don't think I'm going to use in cash. Tobias Harris, if Embiid's out, like Tobias Harris gets a massive increase in usage, should be a mainstay in your tournaments and possibly in your cash game lineup. So he's a guy that I definitely want to look at for tournaments if Embiid's out. If Embiid's in, I still think he's in play. He can still end up with 45 points, even in a tough matchup versus Utah. But Tobias Harris is more in play if Embiid is ruled out. And the nice part about Superdraft, if we don't get that news before the game, before lock, you can basically mass player swap Embiid in the forward position over to Tobias Harris or over to Simmons if you want, although Simmons is a little bit of a downgrade. If Embiid's out, he definitely works better. I think court IQ this year, he actually gets a decent increase or decrease without Embiid on the floor. So Simmons is more in play if Embiid is playing. I think Simmons is definitely in play for tournaments. 1.35x multiplier, a little bit high considering what he can do. After that, like Bogdanovich hasn't had a huge game, but 1.65x multiplier, he can definitely get it done with scoring. He can end up with 40 plus points, which at 1.6x multiplier is going to get you in 60. 60 is kind of my target range for tournaments. Like I want to get 60 with a legit shot at 70 or even possibly 80. So like guys like Luka definitely has a decent shot at 60 when he's at a 1x multiplier. So he's still in play, but does he have a realistic shot at 80? I didn't really think so the other night. And then of course he did. And that kind of destroyed my night. But like, you're kind of shooting for like, I want 60. I want a decent chance at 60. You're not going to see median projection for most of these guys of 60 or more. Like on any given night, you'll generally see the top guy about 64. Median projection for the next few guys is going to be around high 50s, mid 50s. And then the tournament guys, you're going to see median projection like right here of 50 or below. So we got Tobias Harris, Wiggins. These guys are all in play for tournaments. Harrison Barnes is definitely a good option in tournaments. It's matching versus Brooklyn. Brooklyn is one of the fastest paced teams in the NBA. They're one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA. So he can absolutely crush in any given matchup. We've seen him over the last 7 games have 40 or 4 40-point outbursts and then 3 just terrible games. He kind of is inconsistent. In faster paced matchups, he'll tend to take more shots, which his usage is one of the biggest things you need in any given spot for him to go for one of those 40, 45-point games. And as a matchup versus Brooklyn, he definitely has a chance of getting 20, 25 points, but he also has a chance of getting near 50. Harrison Barnes is doing a lot more on the offensive end. If Bagley's end up ruled out, which is definitely a distinct possibility, he's been out the last 2 games. It's a big increase with Barnes. The usage for Bagley kind of goes more towards him than it does towards other players. So Barnes is definitely a guy I'm interested in. Julius Randle, 1.05x multiplier. This is just a spot where it's too low. It's too low, so not really in play. Yes, he can end up with a 60-point game, but more than likely, you see his median projection around 47, over 10 points lower than Embiid and around 10 points lower than Butler. Doesn't really make it into my builds. I'm not seeing a huge amount of upside there. And the downside and floor just isn't very high at 30. I'd rather take a guy like Ingles here, who has a high multiplier. If he gets hot from behind the arc, can end up with 77, 80 points in any given spot. So he's more of a guy I would want to go with. Potentially, I could see using Richaun Holmes at a 1.5x multiplier. Toscano Anderson, his minutes have been kind of up and down, but the multiplier is high enough where I think you can use him. Herter, not a great matchup, but a decent multiplier. Joe Harris, another guy where like high multiplier, lots of 3-point upside, can absolutely end up crushing. So he's a guy that's in play. I just got asked about McGee. I haven't really thought about him too much, but 1.9x multiplier. He can get you the stocks, he can get you the blocks and steals, and he can get a double-double even in a limited amount of time. At this multiplier, it's a little risky, but if you got some room to make up in tournaments towards the end of the night, I believe this is the 10 o'clock Eastern game. Yeah, Cleveland versus Golden State. It's 10 o'clock Eastern game. So if you've got Gobert in there and you've got some room to make up, then McGee makes a decent pivot, or even any one of these guys that's playing in the late game. If you've got Oubre, if you've got Bam, any one of these guys you can swap off over to McGee, and he's going to come in at lower ownership, I would assume, than a lot of these guys. So if you got some room to make up, he definitely makes an interesting tournament pivot. After that, like most of these guys are just kind of in play in tournaments based on an injury. Like right now, Marcus Morris Sr., we saw what he did last night. His multiplier hasn't changed because it was a late game last night and the Kawhi news came out late. So 1.85x multiplier, he crushed last night. If Kawhi is out, then he can absolutely end up with a huge outing here. After that, like most of these guys just aren't really on my radar. Yeah, Robinson can end up with 5, 6, 7 made threes, but likelihood not terribly high. So even at a high multiplier, you're not getting enough to take down a tournament, and you definitely don't want to use him cash, where he's just kind of off my board. All right, let's pop on over to guard position here. Look at that. Boom. You have the 3 core guys for tournaments and 3 core guys for cash. So we know what happens when Durant's out. Kyrie, Harden, huge games on almost every single slate. I plan on using over on Superdraft a little bit of automatically one of them in every single lineup. So Kyrie at 1.2x multiplier, that's way too high for him. Like absolutely way too high for him. And Harden should see a 60-point night, probably a triple-double regardless. So even with a low multiplier, he's a guy that probably should be at a 1x multiplier. And even at a 1x multiplier, probably still a lock and load. So these 3 guys are really your core for cash. Like Donovan Mitchell, I already talked about this if you already read the expert survey, but without Conley on the floor, if you run court IQ, this is kind of where you need to look into things more. Without Conley on the court, Donovan Mitchell barely has an upgrade in terms of points. But if you run it without Conley and without Clarkson on the court, because they've been staggering his rotation, Donovan Mitchell is averaging 0.23 extra points, or 0.28, I can't remember. It's one of those two. Threes look like 8s. Points per minute more, because Clarkson obviously comes in the game, eats a bunch of usage. He's a 6th man. He gets a ton of stuff off the bench, but they've been staggering the rotation because they need Mitchell in there or Clarkson in there in order to take up most of the usage, because Donovan Mitchell's, since Conley's been out, been a 35+% usage guy. And so a 1.4x multiplier, decent chance I end up just absolutely locking him in and not thinking twice, then using one of Irving or Harden. Like that's kind of my plan preliminary for tournaments here. Locking in Mitchell, using either Kyrie or Harden in every single lineup, and then occasionally throwing in Simmons, throwing in a guy like De'Aaron Fox, and also possibly changing things around. The nice part, the reason why I have Fox here in blue is because if I have room to make up later on in the night, I know that everyone's going to have Kyrie, Harden, or both. So if I swap off of them over to De'Aaron Fox, because I have some room to make up, either in cash or in tournaments or in smaller field tournaments, he's a guy that I want to do it with. De'Aaron Fox has 60, 70 point upside in any given matchup. And a matchup versus Brooklyn is the perfect spot for him to go for a 60+ fantasy point outing. So he's definitely a guy that I'm going to be overweight on, and a guy that I will be swapping over later on in the night in order to make up a little bit of room. Outside of that, you got a decent amount of guys that are definitely in play for tournaments. Oubre, I already talked about him. Steph, even at a 1x multiplier, can he outscore Harden by 10 points? Absolutely. Steph gets hot, he can outscore anyone. Sexton, decent multiplier. Same with Garland. In a matchup versus Golden State, high pace game, one of these guys should end up crushing their value. We see their ceiling 67, 71. That's not bad at all. Buddy Hyde, again, 1.55x multiplier, shoots a lot of threes. Match versus Brooklyn, high-paced matchup, giving up a lot of threes. His floor is really low, but he can screw us over at any given time. But because of the high multiplier, because of the 3-point bonus, he is a guy that can be on the winning lineup any given night, and especially a matchup versus Brooklyn. So that Tyrese Halliburton, 6th man off the bench, there's a chance that on the second end of back-to-back, they end up sitting Fox, because he was a little bit injured. We saw him rest late scratch the other night. He did end up playing last night, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if De'Aaron Fox ends up sitting on the second end of back-to-back. Clarkson, big multiplier, eats up all the usage, 6th man of the year, probably crushing. Can see him with a big night, so he's definitely a guy that's in play with tournament. With Dragic still out, don't mind none, but not a guy that I want to use. Same thing with Hero. It's just their multipliers are high enough where they do make an interesting play in bigger field tournaments. Let's say everyone's playing Butler. Like there's a chance that Nunn and Hero take up most of the usage. Butler has just an okay game, and these guys end up crushing. So in tournaments, they're definitely in play. Lou Will, I don't care if Kawhi plays or not. Like Lou Will is still in play. He's definitely a better play if he's starting. If Kawhi's out, we saw what he did last night. But he's put up a few 40-point outings recently. But recently he's been getting up into the mid-20s, high 20s. And so we could potentially see that again. He's a guy that just eats up all the usage, is going to shoot. And so he, at a 1.7x multiplier, can pretty easily end up with 30 and definitely has a chance at 40 plus, because if he gets hot, especially if Kawhi's out, he's just going to keep chucking, and he can absolutely destroy his multiplier of 1.7x. He's probably my favorite tournament play, whether Kawhi plays or not. Even on the second of the back-to-back, I'm not terribly worried. After that, we get to the same guys we've talked about, like Reggie Jackson potentially in play if Kawhi is out. Batum potentially in play if Kawhi is out. Harris in play just because of his high multiplier. He can get hot, especially if you're not using both Kyrie and Harden. Usage, or all the usage points have to come from somewhere. So there's a chance that Harden's dishing it out to the outside and he's popping up threes all game long. So Harris can get there. Seth Curry, he's not in play for me right now, but again, he's been one of the best shooters from behind the arc in NBA history. And if Embiid's out, they're going to have to get some usage somewhere. He's probably going to be the main beneficiary. He had that tough string of games right after COVID. He was definitely recovering, but we've seen him into the 30-minute range recently. And if Embiid's out, there's a decent chance where he's just popping shots all game long, gets a tough Utah defense, and he can get there super easy and probably end up with a 40-point outing. Like there's a chance if Embiid doesn't play that he is the top scoring guy when you consider multiplier on the entire night. It's a distinct possibility. I wouldn't count on it, but he's definitely a guy in tournaments I'm going to use quite a bit. After that, like the New York situation is kind of confusing and trash and something I hate, because no one's getting that consistent high minutes, because they have Rose here, they have Burks, they have Moutier or Emmanuel Quickly, they have Peyton. Like all these guys are high multipliers. If any one of them gets 30 plus minutes, they can smash these multipliers. Just I can't really like rely on it. If you want to take a shot on Quickly, if you want to take a shot on D Rose, if you want to take a shot on Peyton, any one of them can crush at a 1.7x multiplier. But you have to rely on a whole lot and hope for the likes of Mitchell, Kyrie, Harden, Butler, Sexton, Ingles, Fox, Simmons, Trae Young, all these guys to have only 2 guys have a really good night in order for him to be the optimal play on the winning lineup. So it's just not something I want to take a shot on. I'd rather take a shot on any of these tournament plays or even Lou Will, because the chances of Lou Will getting 30 minutes is probably higher than Derrick Rose, Moutier, Peyton, Burks. Like realistically, I don't think many of those guys, if any, are going to end up with 30 minutes. Outside of that, like we get down to this range and just not a ton. Like Danny Green can have his ceiling game that he did once and destroyed all our souls, but it's unlikely. We're getting questions about Simmons here tonight. I'm always a little bit up in the air on Simmons. I think if I'm using him, I'm more using him on the 4 position, because we see these guys. Like you have 5 guys right here that are all fantastic plays in both cash and in tournaments. So I don't know if I want to set positions for Simmons, but if I move over here to forward, Embiid, Butler, Draymond, like Embiid at this low multiplier, he can have an off night. He can get into foul trouble. This game could be a blowout. Butler can end up with a rough night, and at 1.3x multiplier, he might be dishing it out. There's a chance that it's a Bam game and Nunn and Hero do well, and Butler just decides like, hey, I don't need to do all this. I'm only going to put up 8-10 shot attempts. I'm going to defer to everyone else. because he does that. We saw it in the finals last year. We've seen it multiple times this year. We saw it in the last game where he only put up top 10 shot attempts. Plus, it's against the Clippers. It can be a blowout. Golden State versus Cleveland. Steph gets hot. This game's a blowout. And Draymond doesn't end up playing a ton of minutes. In goals, you can play at the guard position. You can play at the small forward position. But he's kind of reliant. He has a bad night shooting. He doesn't end up doing well. Bam, again, potentially a blowout. Oubre, potential blowout. So Simmons is definitely more in play for me in tournaments and potentially a guy that I would add to an Embiid stack, but probably not if the bigger field tournaments. That's more of like the $30 single entry, which, by the way, overlays every night. If you have $30 to play in DFS tonight, your best shot is the big 50-50s over on Superdraft or the single entry that I think they need, 75, 80 in order to break even. And it generally comes in at 65 entries a night. So they're just fine with losing money on that. If you like single entry and you're not looking for a giant field, play that single entry. If you want a giant field GPP, their 75K $15 GPP is going to have more overlay than any other one in the industry. If that's too much money for you, play the $4. Like literally there's something over on Superdraft for everyone. So get on over there, get signed up using promo code Grinders and get that free money. It's that simple. But that's pretty much it for the slate, guys. If you have any other questions, go ahead and drop them in real quick and I'll try and get to them before we get out of here. But is the Sacramento Nets stack going to be chalk? I don't know. Harden and Kyrie will be chalk, like 100%, unless one of them gets ruled out, in which case the other one will be mega chalk. Then Brooklyn is going to be chalk because without KD, we know what the usage is like. So they will be chalk. I don't know if Barnes is going to be chalk on the other side. I don't know if Halliburton is. I don't think Fox will be chalk. Like people are going to go with Mitchell. So the game stack, at least over on Superdraft, will not be chalky. It's more going to be people using one of Kyrie or Harden or using both of them. I don't think a ton of people are going to bring it back with Fox or Barnes or anything, but I don't hate that. Is Leonard being overlooked on Superdraft? No. Like he'll still be owned. He'll still be moderately owned. And yes, he can go for a big night, but I mean, we see his median projection right here. It's 50, ceiling of 68. That's good. It's not great. At a 1.1x multiplier, too many things need to happen in order for him to be the best play on the night, which I want every single guy I play to have a distinct possibility of being the highest point. Because you're not talking about salary. You're not talking about this guy was the best play. Or arguably you could say this guy was the best play. Oh, with all this value, like this value play wasn't actually the best play, even though he 7x'd, 8x'd. Like there's multiple guys that do that. Superdraft, you have a very, very like just official, this person was the best play on the night. You have, he was the highest scoring guy. That's it. Like last night, I can't remember who it was exactly. I think it was Joker. He went for 85 points. And then I think Lou Will went for 78. Like those were the best plays on the night because they ended up with the most points. Yeah, you can bring in ownership into it. And so realistically, like, oh, this guy was a great play because he was 1.5% owned. But like you have very distinct, like the optimal center play was this guy because salary isn't a thing. For guards and forwards, you have these three guys were the top 3 scoring guards. Therefore, they were the 3 top plays. Same thing with forward. You can say like, okay, this was the most important guy to have in your lineup because Lou Will last night was 20% owned. He put up 78. So he was like a better technical play than other guys because I think Dame was like 60% owned. I can't remember who was I owned, but essentially like certain guys will come in at high ownership. And so they aren't technically the best play. Just if you're avoiding the guys that are coming in at 60% ownership. So like Mitchell, Kyrie, Harden, those guys are all going to come in at 50+% ownership, maybe as high as 70. If you avoid the one guy or the 2 guys that end up putting up a dud night or just not even a great night, let's say Harden goes for 50 points, distinct possibility, or Kyrie goes for 40 points, distinct possibility. They're probably not going to be on the winning lineups. Definitely spots where that does end up happening. But if you can avoid the guy that's coming in at super high ownership, because the chances all 3 not hitting, like I would include one of Kyrie, Mitchell, or Harden in every single lineup. But you just have to avoid the guy that ends up missing. Let's see. See us playing Kyrie and Harden in the same lineup. Absolutely, you can, but I'm probably bringing it back with one of Fox, Barnes, Holmes, Halliburton, because I'm assuming that game is going to stay close, which I have 4-point spread and a 242 total. That's definitely the possibility. Panther, congrats on going second in single entry last week. Proud of you. Capella, good play. He's a decent play. Center is kind of spread out, like Embiid's the chalk play, but you can play him at forward too. So Capella is definitely a guy that you can play. I think he's going to get more run in a slower paced matchup. This could potentially be his 20-20 night, 20 boards, 20 rebounds. And with Noel in there, like, don't really worry about the defensive matchup. He can end up with multiple blocks, which again, over on Superdraft is worth 3. We've seen him with a 10 block game already. So Capella's definitely a guy that's in play in tournaments. Jordan or Noel at center for DK single entry. Noel's going to be chalkier. I like DeAndre Jordan. If he does end up playing 30 minutes tonight, which they don't have a ton of height, granted, they don't need it versus Sacramento, but I like Jordan better. What about Westbrook? Westbrook isn't on this slate. That's the game I was talking about. Superdraft always starts 30 minutes after, or most nights starts 30 minutes after the main slate, depending on how many games there are and how many games start in the first thing. So after you finish with DK, after you finish with FanDuel, come on over to Superdraft, make your lineups there. They're almost guaranteed be overlay. So get on over there and make it after DK if you're worried about things, especially if you're a cash game guy. More information out there makes things easier. Should I play Fox and run it back with Harden? Yes, or Kyrie, either one. You're assuming the game's going to stay close. It's high scoring. It's high paced. Yeah. Can we just pay down today, as of today, or paying up is a must? I mean, that's more on DraftKings and Superdraft, but I think there is a middle build or a middle tier build that does end up crushing. Are you on show with Dean today? Yeah, ask me a lot of these questions in 2 hours when I'm on Grinders Live. So I'll be back here. I always am. Let's see. You want my babies? Hopefully I'm not sterile, but I'm probably not giving to you smoothies. Yeah, no. So that's basically it, guys. It's been a good show. If you want, hop on air in 2 hours, and me and Dean will be talking about things. He'll be saying some dumb stuff. I'll be saying some genius stuff because I'm the voice of our generation. But yeah, hopefully helpful on Superdraft. If you got any questions or comments or anything that you want to see on the show, just go ahead and shoot me out on Twitter, Genie407, or leave it in the comment section. But yeah, good luck tonight, guys. I'm out of here. Sign up for Superdraft using the promo code Grinders. See you, kids.